this from the LA Times. 17 LA gangs have sent out crews to follow and rob the city's wealthiest, LAPD says. More than a dozen Los Angeles gangs are targeting some of the city's wealthiest residents in new and aggressive manner, sending out crews in multiple cars to find, follow, and rob people driving high-end vehicles or wearing expensive jewelry, according to police. In many cases, they're making off with designer handbags, diamond-studded watches, and other items worth tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, and then peddling them to black market buyers who are willing to turn a blind eye to the underlying violence. In some cases, suspects have been arrested but then released from custody, according to police, only to commit additional robberies. So, Tina, you go because you're the LA journalist here. I have some thoughts, but to me, it kind of goes to what we were just talking about. I'm not condoning violence against poor or wealthy people, but let's remember, gang members. A lot of those people get into gangs for the same reasons we're talking about. They got no other options economically, job-wise, etc.
And actually, what's interesting about this article is our gang problem is actually not as bad as it used to be. I mean, I don't think it's a pressing issue in the city. Of course, that's not going to help their narrative. I think a lot of these guys that they're saying are in these crews, these gangs, they're doing a Robin Hood act in their mind. I don't know that it's motivated by the Crips or the Bloods. It doesn't specifically say in that report who these gangs are. It just says there's 17 gangs. So that's not really clear to me. But to me, this is just the inevitable outcome of having such rampant income inequality, no affordable housing. I mean, we've said this before, you cannot pay rent in Los Angeles off of the minimum wage here. It's not possible. Even if you worked 60 hours a week, you couldn't make ends meet. It's ridiculous that this is where we're at. So I've been saying this for a while now. Eventually, crime is going to start occurring against the wealthy people, and it's going to get bad. I always think to myself, when are they going to realize that's the inevitable outcome of what they're doing? When are they going to wake up and say, like, maybe because we're not secure anymore? It's a security issue. So right. That hasn't happened. And of course, now the next response is going to be from everybody running for city council, who's going to be tougher on crime. I guarantee that that's going to be what happens next. I think also part of it, too, is there's this trend for these crazy, wealthy, expensive watches that have come back into style. For a long time, people stopped wearing watches because we have time on our phone, what have you. But now they have these, $500,000 watches that these guys are all out there wearing, and it's sort of a status symbol. So I think they've been targeting folks coming out of clubs wearing these watches or out of Beverly Hills, high-end eateries, et cetera.
I do feel not just with gangs, but just working class people, I do think we're going to see even some types of things that start out nonviolent, protest outside Jeff Bezos's mansions, other protests, economic protests. I do think if those get bigger, that could easily turn to more aggressive, violent tactics. I don't condone violence for two reasons. I just don't condone it, but also in history, it hasn't been effective in terms of social change. But at the end of the day, I don't even call it income inequality anymore. This is a cesspool of corruption, this country.
Oh, 100%.
And also you have, a lot of these Hollywood celebrities and this and that tweeting out, it's take one on the chin. It's the patriotic thing to do. If we have to pay more gas because of the Russian invasion, so be it, as they tweet from their mansions and pools. And that turns off a lot of people who, like you said, can't live in LA anymore, can't live in New York City anymore, are working 2 or 3 jobs, are being forced to go into work if they have COVID or when it's bad. So again, I think you're right. I think it does make sense. You're going to start seeing more violence. And also, again, I don't know his full motivation. Obviously, he had mental health issues. But if you watched his YouTube videos, a lot of what he talked about was economics, too, outside of the other unhinged things. So I fear we're going to see more of this. And frankly, not all wealthy people are terrible people, of course. Some of them do charitable things. Some of them got their money the right way. Some of them are calling. You have patriotic millionaires who's calling for more taxes. But, at the end of the day, we have a guilt. We literally have a Gilded Age and an economic Hunger Games going on.
100%. It's worse now than it was in the 1920s. It's untenable. And it's, in fact, I keep going back to when I interviewed Tom Steyer on this, and one of the things I asked him is like, when is the plutonomy going to wake up, see what they're doing, and realize that it's untenable for not only the security issues, but just the entire system can't keep going this way. And his response to me was never. We're going to have to force them. So if that is the case, if he's right on that, that we have to force them, then I think the inevitable outcome here is more violence. Because your normal everyday protests aren't going to change anything. We've seen that already. I do think the one thing that is going to help to change it is the rebirth of the labor movement. I'm glad to see that happening. I think folks getting out there on the picket line, voting for strike authorizations, doing unionizing work like Chris Smalls is doing, I think that will effectively produce more change than just an average protest will. But I do think you're right. At some point, these protests, in fact, we've already had a couple in LA that have kind of pushed the envelope on that. The anti-vaxxer one that I was at, that 2 people got stabbed, definitely crossed the line, although that was not about politicians or political motivations. It was about vaccines. I still think that tension exists. And, some of the white supremacists, I know I'd send Colin some screenshots of that, but it might be helpful for people to see what the white nationalist groups are saying about this guy on Telegram, because they're recognizing, it's weird. They both want to point out the same problem, right? The income inequality, because the neo-Nazis feel the same way, right? They're angry about that. They're just choosing to put their anger into blaming Jewish folks that control the banks, Black folks that work for the Jewish folks. Their conspiracies are very wound up in racism and, Aryan ideology. Whereas, guys like our shooter also recognize this as being a problem. And his anger is coming out in a different way, right? His anger is coming out of a system that no matter what he does is going to look at him as somebody other than an equal. So all of these problems are kind of creating this weird cesspool of anti-establishment anger that I'm not sure which direction that's going to go at this point, but I do know that it's getting ready to explode. And we've been talking about this, Jordan, for like a year now, saying it's going to explode. It's going to explode. Well, it is getting closer to that boiling point, I think.
Right. And the response apparently will be more police, more new technology, i.e. facial recognition. Maybe they'll throw in some robots to attack you. So the police state and the surveillance state, they're not going to gently go quietly into the night. Crime is a problem. I'm not minimizing that. But
it's a problem. It's less severe than what they're making it out to be. If you actually go and look at the data, I think they are kind of ramping that up because they want to, create a certain environment of fear. But it is a problem. And I'm not, here's the thing. People need to understand. We can all say that crime is awful, violence is awful. We don't want to see people beaten up, robbed. Like, no, of course we don't. It's terrible. But we also want to be able to look at the reasons that it's happening, because unless we're ready to do that, we cannot solve the problem. And right now, our politicians, our police force, the powers that be, however you want to frame that, aren't having a realistic conversation about those metrics.
And we also need to redefine crime, because actual crime is people having to ration insulin in this country because,
I agree. Yeah.
Because we allow for-profit healthcare companies who have bought off the Republicans and Democrats to basically be a corrupt middleman, and people die as a result. Actual crime in this country are banks, which buy off the politicians, literally giving Black and brown Americans essentially rigging mortgages and other lending to give them higher costs to pay it back and higher interest rates. Actual crime in this country has to do with literally giving out PPP loans that were meant for small businesses, and then wealthy fuckers who buy up the politicians literally getting PPP loans, even though they're millionaires and billionaires. I could go on.
Insider trading with the stock market. I mean, it's never ending.
Yeah, that crime doesn't really get covered by the corporate press.
And that is the kind of crime that is creating this other kind of crime, right? This, to me, is the reaction to.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.